for those of you who've not familiar with the Global Citizen, this is something that we've been doing now for the last almost 3-4 years. And it's an opportunity for our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Francis Petersen, to have a guest, to have a conversation or a dialogue on some of the critical issues that are happening globally, and a way of also positioning the University of the Free State globally and part of a global conversation. And we've had guests before. We've actually had events here as well, and we've had events in the UK. And this evening, we're really privileged to have Thuli Madonsela. I'm not going to introduce Thuli or the Vice-Chancellor. That's going to be Sharon's job, because she's going to be introducing them, and then Professor Petersen and Thuli will be in conversation. So again, very warm welcome and happy birthday, and warm welcome to you, Sharon. And I'm going to hand it over to you so that you can introduce Thuli and the Vice-Chancellor. Thanks.
Thank you, Russell. Very nice to hear from you and to be part of this occasion. I'm Sharon Constançon. I am the chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce UK, which is based in the UK, looking after South Africa's interests within the UK and looking to promote trade, investment, and also being somewhere where South Africans in the UK can find a common place, a friendship, and an opportunity to do business together. So I feel honored to be in Bloemfontein tonight. Thank you very, very much. I haven't been in Bloemfontein for probably 2 decades since I was last there. And we're in summer, but I think we're probably almost as cold as you are. I welcome our Global Citizen Series. We've been running it now for a few years with the University of the Free State, with Professor Francis Petersen. And I thank him for the amazing array of people he manages to find, that all of you are so keen on spending time with us, listening to the insights that we gain. Professor Petersen, thank you very much. And to Professor Thuli Madonsela, it's wonderful to see you again. We had many events together when she was last in the UK, and it's wonderful to be spending time with you again, Professor. Thank you very much for being with us today. And just 2 minutes, if I could just say a few words about Thuli. South African advocate and professor of law, holding a chair in social justice at Stellenbosch University, and has held that position since 2018. She served as the third public prosecutor of South Africa from 2009 to 2016, as she helped draft the final constitution of the South Africa promulgated by President Nelson Mandela. So she has been very instrumental in the South Africa we have today, and the South Africa we've seen unfold over the last month. So I welcome both of them on the stage.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And let me also extend my best wishes to you on your birthday. Thuli, also from my side, welcome to have, and it's good to have you here in Bloemfontein. I know that you have been on our campus a couple of times, and always great to welcome you back. Now, Russell has mentioned that it's also the elections in the UK today. And it's also reflect me back to the 29th of May, where we as South Africans went to the polls and was participating in the voting. We had the results that came out, and the elections was declared fair and free. One of the things that we don't often talk about is the effectiveness and the role of the Independent Electoral Commission, the IEC.
Thank you, Prof Francis. Firstly, just thank you for the privilege to be here, and greetings to our colleague Sharon and to everyone on the call and in the room. Regarding our IEC, it is one of those institutions in our country that make us proud to be South African. They have discharged their responsibilities excellently, not just here in South Africa, but they have been exemplary to many African countries and other countries in the world. Sometimes people think excellence means you don't drop one ball. Trust me, the Springboks are excellent, but once in a while they do drop a ball. The Proteas are excellent. They just dropped the ball in the last mile. I think with the IEC, the report that was issued by President Kenyatta indicated that there may have been one or two small balls that fell, and suggested how could that be improved, like starting on time, and also just making sure that there's more voter education. But by and large, they've excelled beyond our expectations. And I think we should be proud of them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's move on. I said let's fast forward, but it's not that long ago when the Government of National Unity was formed, and then thereafter it took a little bit of time when the executive was announced by the president. What are your thoughts? What can we expect from the Government of National Unity? It's one where I said I probably would say, and I often say that in a university setup, that there might be different constituencies that are either serving on the council or serving in committees within the university. But once they're in the committee, they should serve the purpose of what the committee is intended for. With the Government of National Unity, we also have obviously a distribution. There was a lot of parties that is part of the ENU. So if you look at inclusivity, it's probably well represented. But in terms of the effectiveness and the expectation of the ENU, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have two areas that I'm very interested in life. One is justice, and the other one is integrity. So I think on integrity, I'm certain that we're going to do well with the Government of National Unity. And my theory is that if you're suspicious of each other and you don't even fully like each other, there's no chance of anybody being corrupt because somebody's watching you. So I think we're going to do well on integrity and corruption. But a colleague earlier corrected me that maybe I'm over-optimistic, but I still think so. But on a much more serious note, a Government of National Unity is sort of a grand coalition. And your greatest challenge is to make sure that your coalition does not become a collision, as many people pronounce coalition as a collision. And it can become a head-on collision if there's poor leadership, there's lack of basic intelligences such as emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and even spiritual intelligence. So people will have to level up on those intelligences. But Judge Dennis Davis once said, an office makes a person. So I think everyone is likely to rise to the occasion. So I did say that I have two interests, social justice generally, but particularly social justice. When I was doing my scenarios about the future of South Africa post-conference, post-29 May, I was worried that certain combinations might be bad for social justice. But today, I actually think the combination we have forces the conversation. At the moment, we have relied too much on the law to move us on transformation. Having this kind of government of national unity forces people to talk to each other. I mean, the area you spoke about, I'll never forget about where's the D. So I think they will start thinking, okay, we want growth, but we want growth and development together, parallel to each other and intertwining with each other, because we want sustainable. I also hope that they'll start talking about the fact that we're building a society with an economy that supports the society. Up until now, some have been talking about building a society, others have been talking about building an economy. And so you and I are just cogs in the machinery of the economy. But a proper approach is we're building a society and we need an economy that is one of the pillars of that society.
So I think the audience might probably ask, what do you mean by where's the D? So I just wanted to explain in the conversation before the Global Citizen, I said to Thuli that in my capacity, in my previous life, I was executive vice president of Mintech, and we were looking at development projects and looking for funding. So I had a meeting with the CEO of the then IDC, and I said, well, these are fantastic projects for development of South Africa. And he said, no, they can't fund these projects. I said, but these are development projects. What happened to the D in the IDC? You know, so there's where the D in the IDC comes from. But Thuli, I want to now obviously move to the social justice conversation. So in your role as director for the Centre of Social Justice at the University of Free State in the Faculty of Law, you also we want systems, so it doesn't really matter. But you're also the Lord Trust Research Chair in social justice. And I just wanted to hear, when you talk about social justice, obviously we talk it in the context of South Africa, but we can have the same question globally. My first question, earlier question, was your expectation about the UNU in terms of their performance. But I want to zoom it now a little bit into social justice. What would be your expectations, or what would you like to see from the government, from national unity, in terms of responding to social justice challenges in South Africa? Now, I know that's a very big question, but we have to start somewhere.
No, we should start somewhere. Firstly, just congratulations on your anticipated job. You see, Prof Francis is already missing you guys. That's what I'm saying. I think the first thing I would like to see is something like what you see behind me. I mean, how often do you get our national leaders mention the word social justice? Those who are brand experts say, if you don't mention something, then you're communicating to people that it doesn't matter. It's only the things that you mention all the time. How many times do our leaders mention economic growth? Economic growth. So I would like them to mention social justice. And I don't want to be understood to be saying I don't want economic growth. It is economic growth should be one of the engines of building an inclusive society. People think that economic growth automatically creates a just society. Do you know that the first time this country experienced poverty was at the height of economic growth? When South Africa started to industrialize, when we got mass agriculture, we got Kimberley, the diamond discovered, gold in Joburg. You start around 1840 when the Dutch Synod mentions for the first time the problem of white poverty as you are industrializing. By the time people were complaining so much about poverty, well, mostly concerned about white poverty in the 1920s, economic growth was at its height again. No, 1920s, we've just had the First World War, so it was a problem. So it's not automatic that when you get economic growth, you get equality, you get a reduction of poverty, you get employment, especially in the 21st century, where machines and humans are competing and humans are winning. So what do I expect? I expect when you go into a government office to see social justice being given prominence, as we see in these boards behind. And I expect them to have a conversation about what it means. Earlier on, we spoke about the fact that a lot of people are afraid of the word, even though it's in our constitution, even though the Constitutional Court has clarified it so beautifully and linked it to Ubuntu, which is really about the equal valuing of all human beings, the interconnectedness of human beings, human solidarity, and all of those beautiful concepts that are about building a society of equals and a society where people are bound by their shared humanity. But a lot of politicians still think social justice is socialism, and they're scared of. So if they have these conversations and they read a little bit from Constitutional Court judgments, from what you guys are saying and from what we are saying at Stellenbosch University, it would be wonderful. But lastly, our pet project, and you know this because you are a member of the Council of Social Justice Champions, is a project that is about anticipatory impact. So I'm hoping government will integrate the notion of anticipatory impact assessment in all its work. And we have an instrument called the Social Justice Impact Assessment Matrix, which is still rudimentary at this stage, but it still could predict that how we're approaching COVID-19 was going to have winners and losers, and how we're approaching the mitigation packages afterwards was going to have winners and losers. And so if in future we integrate that kind of science and we even bring in data science, we will, every time we come up with a policy, understand what will it mean for older persons? Will it advance equality for them or exacerbate it? What will it mean for disabled people? What will it mean for rich people? What will it mean for rural people? So you want your policy to scan the whole segment of humanity and say, is there any segment of humanity that will be worse off after you've implemented this policy? Or will everyone be elevated and the inequalities reduced?
So I want to just remain with the social justice discussion. Within the context of the University of the Free State, we have owned the social justice concept as part of our DNA, embedded also in our student success work. So we call student success as a social justice imperative. And so everything that we do it from that perspective. But I in the midst of what's happening the last couple of days on our campus, we also have an international conference on public administration and public service delivery. And it's often there where I think social justice sometimes play out. It is, what does the ordinary citizen feels and experience in terms of, say, service delivery? Now, we know what the service delivery record is of the government up until now. Maybe your comments from a social justice perspective in relation to that, and what needs to be done differently to be able to ensure that aspect of social justice is also being seen visibly and been felt visibly at the service delivery level?
Well, absolutely. If it's not felt at service delivery level, Prof, it won't be felt anything. You know, when Eleanor Roosevelt was getting people excited about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, she made a comment about the importance of making sure that those human rights are felt in small places. And she said that if they're not felt in small places, such as homes, factories, offices, and everywhere, we would look for them in the big places and we would not find them. I think it's the same thing with social justice. It must be felt in the classrooms. It must be felt in the academic outputs. It must be felt in how places like this look. It must be felt in the what at Stellenbosch University, they call it visual redress. When you go into an institution, what does it say about who's valued and who's not valued? It must be ultimately felt in service delivery. Incidentally, I read something this week where somebody came up with a study that said they have a finding that says that democracy backsliding is not due to poor service delivery. It's due to the failure to rein in the rogue elements within a democracy. I just said, I don't know what were they drinking. I don't know who paid for that study. The truth is, in our country, and in most countries really, is for people to love democracy, there has to be a marriage between social justice and democracy. And how do you get to that marriage? Through service delivery. And SACC talks a little bit about that in one case where it's PE municipality, where it's just talking about where we come from as a democracy and where we are, and how democracy has to deliver improved human rights. And that can only be done through Ubuntu-infused service delivery. And Ubuntu-infused service delivery is would be service delivery that is anchored in that intermarriage between Ubuntu and social justice, as the Constitutional Court said we should do in S versus Makwanya.
So hopefully with the government of national unity, a marriage of inconvenience, will hopefully change their outlook and their approach to respond positively, at least from a service delivery perspective. You mentioned earlier about the economy, and I want to come back to the economy because economy is obviously still important. If we look at the economy the last 15 years, it was almost stagnant. And we know that a growing economy is not only a growing economy that will assist to deal with poverty, inequality, and unemployment, but it will make a major contribution towards that. What do you think are the levers that need to be pulled through the GNU to be able to get the economy to grow? Now, you mentioned earlier, if we look as a country, there's the economy, and then there's the society, and how do you match the economy to the society rather than the other way around? But we are here, unfortunately, now, and we need the economy to grow. What would you recommend to the GNU? Ask the ministers to come back to the university and spend some time here. I'd like to hear some of your views on that.
Well, there certainly has. On a serious note, you do need an interface between the academic world and those who exercise public power, not necessarily because we at universities know better. It's just we are paid to read, think, write, and talk. and then, of course, there's a lot you get to discover, but an intermarriage between them, what they know, having learned on the ground, and our theoretical approaches, then makes the praxis even more strategic. I would say my own recommendation, don't go for economic growth as your anchor. And I think I've written an article to that to say, this is how South Africa got messed up. They did the Mount Fleur scenarios. And the best case scenario there was the flight of the flamingos. And the flight of the flamingos was not choosing between growth or development. It wasn't trickle down, because if you focus on growth, you're definitely going to go back to trickle down. So that's how we started with Nelson Mandela, and hence the RDP. And then Washington Consensus came in, and Joseph Stiglitz writes in 2002 already, but all economies that chose the growth and redistribution approach failed. Talks about Russia. So you end up with these countries that are perpetually in transition. And the best approach is when you doing these intertwined growth and development, or growth and redistribution. In other words, for example, people say growth and redistribution. You can't grow land. You always have the same amount of land. So how do you grow it first and then redistribute it? You can't grow minerals. You always have the same amount. Water, maybe you can do cloud seeding. So maybe you can grow water. But see what happened in Dubai. So the monthly scenarios was, there's this Asian African saying, if you want to be prosperous for a year, grow crops. If you want to be prosperous for 10 years, grow trees or plant trees. If you want to be prosperous for 100 years and beyond, invest in people. South Africa was created into a diamond-shaped economy, not society, by disempowering the majority, disengaging them from self-reliance and everything. If you go for growth and distribution, then you're going to grow those again that were privileged and then try and trickle down some crumbs, which Bishop Tutu said that's not a good idea. But if you go the flight of the flamingos, then you invest in everyone. You go to a village and you look at, what do we do in this village? At Cities Alliance, we talk about, for example, instead of investing in big cities like Gauteng, like Joburg, Cape Town, etc., do invest, but shift your development strategy to secondary cities as well. In that way, the left behind are brought into the economy, but you hit two birds with one stone, in that one of the greatest challenges we have in the cities is overcrowding. Resources, overstretch of resources such as electricity, water, and roads, etc. But if you begin to develop the country that was underdeveloped, all segments of the country that are underdeveloped, you're not going to get somebody living in Limpopo to come to Joburg and live like a dog when they have a whole mansion in Limpopo, because they're following those crumbs of your trickle-down little jobs. If you go all over the country, I mean, if I look at this room, students come up with a whole lot of science projects. A lot of those end up nowhere. Maybe SUs like Stellenbosch University, where they are assisted by the innovation unit to turn those into IPs and get scaled. But many in the rural areas and the various historically Black universities, great ideas die like that. So if you invest in those, then what you're doing, you're diversifying your economy, democratizing your economy, and rising together. Instead of raising a few and hoping they'll trickle things down, which is just keeping the pyramid. Like, look, I'm here. You and I are here because we made it through the pyramid, but it's still a pyramid society. Well, a pyramid economy.
Yeah.
We need a diamond-shaped society. So that's a democratized economy, that's a diversified. What it does, it gives you a bulge in the middle. I don't know about you, Prof, but at any given stage, I have 5 or more people that depend on me financially monthly. And that means my own, and then that excludes the 5 students that I'm currently supporting because they wouldn't have been able to stay at Stellenbosch University beginning of this year because of the accommodation issues. Just talking about my standard thing. Now, if you diversify the economy, there's opportunities for for most people. People who are competent or people who have natural talent and work hard should not find it hard to express their talents. That goes to Amartya Sen that I spoke about, the social justice philosopher from India. His approach is raise everyone to a standard of decent human living, what we call in Ubuntu. I mean, in Ubuntu, we say, for example, you made Umuntu. When I say you made me Umuntu, I mean you treated me like we came here. Every time we come here, we treat it as Abantu because you guys have Ubuntu, is at the level of human beings. But secondly, Sen also says, create conditions for everyone's talent to rise. In so doing, then we're growing through redistribution. No, and people say you redistribute poverty. No, you don't redistribute poverty. You raise people in order to rise together.
There is while we're on the economy, I still got a couple of other questions, but I want to leave that for the time being, depending on what other questions come from the floor. But on the economy, I want your view on, because I read your article on that, and that's the reason why I'm standing still here at the economy. Your view on the role of business and industry in a social justice umbrella, the way that you've explained it, because the sort of traditional industry will probably argue differently to what you have said, to say that it is about getting investment in South Africa. It is around try to get us on the grey list, get all of those things sorted. It is about building industry, building economies, promoting entrepreneurship, but coming back to economic growth. But in your argument, the way that you have articulated, what will be the role, the sort of the different role that business needs to play? Because there's a lot of business people, if they're not in the audience, I presume there's some of them in the audience, but there's going to be a lot of them on the virtual call as well. What is the message that you would give to them?
Well, business is a crucial part of our society and of the world. And just as business played a central role in creating our pyramid society, business called the shots, by the way. The Land Grey Act was asked for by business. 1913 Land Act was asked for by business. 1911 Mines and Works Act was asked for by business. 1926 Job Reservation Act was asked for by business. The only act that I cannot attribute to business, because in terms of our research, we seem to attribute it to what happened after the Carnegie report, is the 1950 Group Areas Act. So just as business played a role in creating the pyramid society, it can create a role in creating this diamond society. And you would say, what has that got to do with business? The business of business is business. But Kofi Annan reached this kind of compact with business. It's called the Global Compact. And they agreed that if you want a sustainable business environment, then business has to grow with society. We used to talk about the social license to operate. Historically, it's always been associated with mines, that you need a social license to operate in the area. But today we know that you need a social license to operate systematically. Look what happened in 2021, those riots. And yes, we quelled them. But what will happen to the next riot? I mean, the greatest challenge globally today is the justice of eating. We feel it in campuses. We feel it in our societies. And the managing trustee of Tuma Foundation was telling me that even societies such as the United Kingdom have people who go for days without food, have people who have to choose between energy and data and food. That creates a very unstable business environment. So business coming in to create a diversified economy and a democratic economy means a stable environment. But just lastly, why did business ask for those X that I spoke about? They were looking for unfree labor. This is language of Professor Peter Blanche from Stellenbosch University. They needed people who had no other choice but to work. What does business need today? Mostly they need a market. So if in a country like South Africa, after COVID-19, you have 62% of your society being poor. You have a dwindling market. Before COVID, it was at 55.5%. 1% of white people were poor. 6% of people classified as Indian, Asian were poor. 39% of people classified as colored were poor. At that stage, 64.2% of people classified as African were poor. That was when the average was 55.5%. Now the average is 62%. So that's not good for business. Not good for business from the point of view of stability.
Yeah.
But it's also not good for business in that business today, a lot of the works will be taken by machines. It needs a market. So what do you do for the people who are being replaced by machines? You need a diversified economy where different people can play roles. Even if they're not employed by somebody else, they're able to employ themselves.
So this is an opportunity for you to also to join in the conversation. And we'll take about 2 or 3 questions from the audience here.
My name is Katsolo. I'm a PhD student in history here at the University of the Free State. And my question goes to ask, what is the importance of history when we are talking about social justice, especially in the wake of South Africa's national elections, especially just like Prof Madonsela has spoken about economic growth not being necessarily good as an anchor. I would just like to get the viewpoint of what is the importance of history when you're talking about social justice. Thank you.
Okay. Speaking my language, that's also my background. Importance of history. Here we are. Okay. Paul?
Good evening. I am Pearl Sitolia from the other campus, 360 kilometers from here. I'm really fascinated by your discussion of the link between development and democracy, in particular, the mediation of social justice in there. But I'm really worried about us. in this sector, the higher education sector. And our role, particularly when we are called upon to articulate things with politicians in particular, or in this kind of transition that we've just seen. I'm not worried about economic growth as much as I am worried about economists and the manner in which they continuously make all of us to worship markets and not draw our attention and the politicians' attention to the fact that markets are also politicized. That every time you hear commentary about anything that happens, including the appointment of the finance minister, it's about the markets are not happy. What happened to economists that are able to draw our attention to the need for local economic development of the type that you are talking about?
Good evening. Prof, you mentioned something about democratic backsliding. So I wrote an article recently, published an article recently about democratic fatigue, trust deficits, as well as institutional erosion in South Africa. And I realized that over the years, South Africa has seen like a decline in voter turnout as well as voter apathy. So in 2019, we saw 66% voter turnout, and then this year we saw 58% voter turnout. So considering the post-election landscape in South Africa, how have the dynamics of democratic fatigue and trust deficits influenced public perception and actual implementation of policies aimed at enhancing social justice, service delivery, higher education, and economic stability? A follow-up question on that is that what role can both government and civil society play in reversing these trends and fostering a more engaged and trusting citizenry, and especially in light of the challenges posed by the recent political developments of the GNU? Thank you.
Starting with the importance of history, it's a known fact that you cannot understand why you are where you are if you don't know where you come from. And it will be difficult not to repeat the same mistakes if you can't reflect on how you ended up in a difficult space. But you have to strike a balance. And in America, a lot of Black professionals that are raising kids in historically disadvantaged areas, they do say strike a balance between understanding that structural inequality is affecting you and also understanding that you are your own liberator, and that applies to women as well. Because otherwise, you become like that kind of person who's bottled in a jar. I mean, my daughter sent us a story about a little rat that got in a jar. And initially there was a little bit of food there. And then as it ate the food, it was going deeper and deeper in the jar. And then eventually it can't go out. So my view is we have to know where we come from. But I would not encourage any child to be fixated on that. But I am encouraging academics and students and policymakers to understand how the past influences the present. And Justice Edwin Cameron in Daniels versus Gribante, which is a case that deals with fair plucked, is what Stellenbosch was before it was taken away from coloureds. I think he ends with something to the effect that the past is here with us. It will not leave us alone until we answer its justice demands. I spoke about that pyramid society. That pyramid society was meant to be white at the top and Black female at the bottom. You go anywhere in this country, that's how society looks like. I travel a lot, you travel a lot. In other countries, you'll find people who clean your hotels to come in different colors. You'll find people who clean streets to come in different colors. In this country, the pyramid is exactly as it was created by Cecil John Rhodes and perfected by Fairholt. If you don't talk about the past, you get our children, and I've had to engage my kids with that, thinking people in Kamandi are poor because they've made poor choices. And I'm not suggesting you who are in this room are not in this room because you've made good choices. But I'm suggesting talking about the past makes us understand that we are in the spaces where we are because of where history has located us at different spaces in time, plus the talents God gave us. When I'm a Christian, I'm going to say God, or whatever you regard as the creator of all of us, plus our own self-exertion. Those three things: talent, exertion, history. And we can't deny that. And history is structural. So that's the thing. What is the link between development and democracy? And your notion of democracy, I like your notion of democracy fatigue. And I think globally we do have democracy fatigue because people, I once heard somebody at a Tuma event saying, we shouldn't look to democracy to deliver social justice. These are two different concepts. And I was shocked because the very reason we ended up with democracy was because of demands for social justice. They just didn't use the word social justice because the word was only coined in 1843 by Italian Jesuit philosopher Luigi Tapparelli, and then further developed by Antonio Rosmini around the same time, I think 1847. But when in Greece, people started getting uneasy. If you read Plato's Republic, there was corruption, there was inequality. Rich people were making laws for everyone that favored them. That article that I wrote about self-favoring. And then people thought, okay, we need a system where all of us will be in the deciding table. That's how democracy was born. And the Greeks looked at Africa and parts of the Mediterranean, and they found systems where in these decisions were made collectively. So the first form of democracy was literally everyone being involved. The Council of 500 was drawn from every dim, and people pulled from lots, almost like pulling names from a head. But democracy and excellence were not on the same page at that stage because anybody could govern, which is what Plato didn't like. So yes, there's democracy fatigue. And I was at a democracy forum last year in Vilnius, where the president of one of the Baltic states said, if democracy does not deliver, it cannot hope to survive. And I agree with that. Mm. So democracy and social justice need to come back together. And the current president of Spain once said at an event, and I had to come and ask him at a forum in Germany many years ago. He wasn't president then, wasn't prime minister. He said, we need to democratize democracy. And for me, that wasn't, how do you democratize? Because democracy is about people's power. How do people's power? But we do need to democratize them. Let's go back to the GNU. The good thing about the GNU as it stands at the moment is that it pulls in different strands of thinking. I don't think that people on that table will only be business-oriented. I think there's enough diversity in that table, gender, race, geography, that the issues of making democracy and social justice will be heard. But I like the fact that business will be heard properly now at the table, because business for some time kept complaining that they can only be heard through lobbying, and sometimes they miss the mark. So you get everyone around the same table, but I'll tell you what would have been my wish. It's John Rawls's notion of how do you get social justice and democracy coming together is, I wish we could cause amnesia to everyone who's in that GNU. And none of them, when they go to make laws or policies, gets to know whether they're rich, poor, black, white, young, old, disabled or not disabled, gay or heterosexual. They have amnesia because then they'll make rules that are good for everyone. The reality is that people just tend to be self-favoring. If I'm rich, I just tend to tailor for me and hope other people fit in. But the same thing, if I'm poor, I tend to tailor for me. So if wishes were horses, I would give them amnesia about their status in society, then would get a socially just future.
Trudy, I wonder whether I know that there's
to Sharon,
the market, but I would maybe suggest to get some of the people on the virtual platform.
Thank you very much. We've got a couple of questions, but I'd like to start first, if I may, Prof, with a question from myself. What are your feelings about the political and economic future over the next 5 years, and what might be the first changes that we should look out for to say we're on a good journey? I'll ask each question individually, if I may. They're very different.
Thank you, Sharon. I think the starting point about the economic future would be for them to resolve these issues where they're not finding each other. For example, there's a section that says, based on the Treaty of Versailles, where business played a crucial role, social justice should be part of the labor market, like of regulation of the relationship between labor and capital. And then some are saying, no, we need a free and free market where if you're poor and you're desperate and need a job, I can pay you whatever. I think they need to resolve that small issue. And the second thing would be resolve the issue of a social grant. Should we give everyone a social grant, which takes us back to Sen's approach to ensuring that destitution is eliminated and you're investing in your people. The third issue is regulation of immigration. There are those who say it should just be open, and those who are saying there's always a certain amount of space for accommodating people at any given time. So you've got, yes, especially when it comes to refugees, you've got to be good, but just immigration has to be regulated. They have to do that. But lastly, which should be number one, is how do you invest in the economy itself in such a way that you democratize it? And business does not lose there. There in the UK, you've got something that is called, is it Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, that side?
The latter.
I don't like BEE. I prefer Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, where instead of fattening the fat cow and hope everyone is going to get milk from it, which is our BEE assimilationist model, is you grow more cows and you fatten them, and those who already have big cows can invest in those. And that's what Tuma proposes as part of enterprising communities. And of course, level the playing field in education. People's emphasis on education is, let's get everyone to be able to read for meaning. I'm happy about that, but the starting point is not that. The starting point is level the playing field in terms of infrastructure for learning. I live in an affluent part of Stellenbosch. I went to Kayamandi during COVID-19 and found that they don't have a library. We brought a friend of mine, his daughter, Amanda Kekes had written a book, and she wanted to donate copies of her book to them and copies of her childhood books. They had no libraries. So how do you have a level playing field when structurally there's no fair start to life?
Challenges. Thank you. We've got a lot of questions in the online environment, but I'm going to try and summarize the theme of a number of these questions on behalf of the audience. And to summarize it is, could you please highlight for us what risks are likely to play out that could create frustrations in the Government of National Unity and this working as a marriage of however inconvenient it may be? What are the risks? What should we look out for? How can business support the government to retain this marriage for the benefit of the children, because that's what they've got to do, and to look after the country?
Just want to explain that it's not my concept. It comes from Professor Susan Boysen and Joel Notichenze. They've written a book on coalitions, marriages of inconvenience. I think business has done mergers and acquisitions, and mergers and acquisitions are often acrimonious sometimes, especially when it's a forced kind of marriage. But they've always found a way thereafter to then start with stabilizing the relationships. So for me, the starting point would be leadership development in government. I'm not suggesting, of course, they're not leaders, they don't understand leadership, but a tweaked approach of leadership, because they've been forced by history into co-leadership. And I think the success of Nelson Mandela's government in the first few years where it succeeded was he was able to steer things towards that co-leadership. And I would say, give them a copy of Rosabeth Moss-Kanter's book, Confidence, because leaders who are confident are able to share space with each other. And business would also, I mean, when people in business, for example, when you guys fight in business, you don't always take it to the street. I don't know what's wrong with politicians. Everything must be aired. We're taught in mediation that once you aid in public, it becomes posturing. And therefore, you want to maintain that sense of power, even if it's illusory. So we'll have to say to them, keep it inside, guys. And even if you're peddling there, just glide. Let us believe you're gliding, which builds confidence. It doesn't mean they shouldn't resolve the issues. It just means they should buy themselves time to resolve their differences without the need to posture to us.
We don't need the public to be judge and jury. We need them to solve the working relationship. So I like your position on that one. It's very enlightening. Another question that's very different, and then I'm going to hand back to the in-house environment. Last question is, there is a election of the leader of the annual ANC halfway through this period of 5 years. That is the normal process of our democracy and the way it works, and it has its benefits and handovers. With it comes a number of its risks. And one of the questions that has been put forward is, how many presidents are we likely to see in this 5 years? I know which one I would like to answer, but I'm going to leave you to give us your answer.
Wow. Oh, I'll have to do some scenario planning. Quite interesting, Sharon. I hadn't thought about what you just brought in about the fact that these political parties might have elections during this period, because we've hanged on the fact that, for example, the person who's pulling everyone together is President Cyril Ramaphosa, who had been part of the first GNU and who has been able to be part of marriages of inconvenience in business and in politics. What happens in the future? I think it will depend on this story, this idea where they've said they need a national dialogue. Please, colleagues, let's all be part of that national dialogue. Because once at least there's an agreement on where we're going and how, and our various roles. My training in strategic planning and project management has taught me that we butt heads a lot when we start with walking before we have agreed on where are we going. Because you'll be pulling left, I'll be pulling right. And in my little space, I think I'm doing the right thing. And in your little space, you think I'm doing the wrong thing. But once you've agreed in concrete terms, what does South Africa look like in 7 years, in 6 years' time, when we reach the first target of SDGs, which is 2030, and also the target of our MDP? What really do we want to achieve in 6 years' time? But I would say also think then beyond that, because those, for example, who want growth, going back to Prof, they want to concentrate on what can we see in the next 5 years, even if that sabotages the future and makes us look like we're growing. You will have to invest in something that is based in anticipatory impact assessment, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, 100 years. I mean, Rwanda is a good case study. I'm not going to say Kagame is the best human rights advocate, but just from the point of view of society by design, he's the best that this country has. I mean, this continent can think about, is design the future and walk into it. So I would say, regardless of who the president is, if there's an agreed on what does the future look like and how do we walk there, there'll be minimum headbutting or collisions. But that takes me back to business, is I think business should also come into the party with a little bit of humility that we know something, but we don't know everything. And working class, everyone should come with the understanding that we know something, but not everything. And everyone should also come with an understanding that, yes, it's okay to demand justice for me. It's okay to demand justice for people like me, but the story does not end at justice as just us. We have to have justice for all. We have to think about the fact that everything has a justice dimension, or all about, and that ultimately we want to build a society where everything and everyone contributes to justice for all.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Very insightful as always. And I just look forward to 5 years of growth for the country and an opportunity we've been given by what has occurred over the last weeks. I now hand over to Russell and back to the floor. Thank you very much. There are a lot of people online and in person. We're not going to be able to get to all of your questions. I sincerely apologize. I'm sure there'll be a route to which we can come back to you.
Thank you, Sharon. So we're going to take our last round of questions because we also have an online audience, right? So I'm going to take 3 questions, and then we're going to, so it's 1, 2, and 3. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so we'll start here.
I'm a professor of history here in the department in the University of the Free State. September coming, I'll be finishing 2 years here. So I'm happy that I came through your presidency, if I can call it that way, because I think from where I'm sitting, transformation has moved, and I appreciate that. But what I really want to say is that last year in October, female student walked into my office, and I could see in her body language that she's sad. So I asked her, can you take a seat there? And she sat down and she said to me, Professor Amupi, I know we need to submit your assignments, but we didn't get our stipend, NEFSAS, for September. And it was the most difficult issue that I had to deal with because I wanted the student to finish the assignments so that we can move to the exams. So this issue, Professor Madonsela, of social justice, our government, our ministers don't talk about it. If we talk about it, even in the lectures, it's like we are communist and we're not communist. So I don't know now that we are living how the next president who's going to take over, how are we going to address these issues? Because for us as teachers, it's very difficult to deal with these assignments, to deal with the students, pass them through when they are not having food in their stomach. It's a very, very emotional thing because some of us will come from those experiences and we are here now teaching and we see ourselves in those students. Thank you.
Good evening, my learned friends over there. I'm Zola Tamai, and I'm working in government for 37 years now. I would like to pose a question to you to say, with regards to IEC, the GNU, how can we influence or how can you influence that space so that in the next elections, I'm looking now at the 8th administration, how do we influence the list of political parties in our country? Because each and everyone who is aggrieved is opening a political party. And we have a long list, which is not going to assist us with anything. It's just blowing out the budget because everyone, it's like it's looking for employment. That's number one. Number two, we're talking social justice. And the university is offering social sciences. Government does not have market for that. It's many students out there. They're looking for work and government can't absorb them. We're talking to social development. There are students who have done this degree, social sciences. They said, we're looking for social workers, not social sciences. And they can't be placed anywhere. So we're breeding people that are going to be unemployed. So that's one recipe for disaster. During COVID, the politicians and the academics were one in solving how do we combat this COVID, and they came up with strategies and the jabs were given to everyone. So in the government of unity, how do you influence that space that the politicians must do the same thing that they did during COVID, because they embrace the academics and then we all work towards a solution-orientated, a kind of approach. Yeah. So how do we do that with this government of national unity? Thank you.
I am Sianda Fojile, second-year law student. My concern is that the relationship between accountability and social justice over the past 30 years has sort of dwindled because the executive has not properly accounted, or government has not properly accounted. What do you think, Professor Madonsela, is going to be the difficulty of the GNU in terms of accountability? I agree that they are on opposite sides of the political spectrum, and that they will sort of exercise oversight against one another. But also there's going to be the bickering and the blame game that it is a minister from political party X that has not done anything. What is going to be the biggest challenge of the GNU in terms of accountability and ensuring that if there is that accountability, social justice is achieved? Thank you.
All right, so maybe I should just respond to the NSFAS question. A lot of work has been done from an higher education sector to engage with the Department of Higher Education and Training in the previous administration and NSFAS. And I think a lot of changes has happened in the beginning of this year. For instance, the direct payments of allowances, that is now taken care by the universities up until the end of the year. We're working on a new system with NSFAS. And without going into the other details, there had been much more open conversation. So even if I am not here anymore, I'm also chair of University South Africa. So about 2 weeks ago, I spent over 2 hours with NSFAS, not only at the University of the Free State issues, but at sector issues. And I'm very optimistic that with the new Minister of Higher Education, with the administrator of NSFAS, with the other VCs, Vice-Chancellors working with us, that we will resolve most of the issues. And again, it is a social justice issue. Certainly at the University of the Free State, we had a sort of a pro-poor approach, where if you have and you receive a grant from NSFAS, and NSFAS only pay that grant or the part of the grant in April or the end of March. The question is, how can and from what would that student live, say January, into January and February and during the months of March? And a lot of institutions, not only the University of the Free State, would then come in and cash flow that. Now, some institutions don't have cash, so we need to find other ways. But I'm very optimistic. Certainly my commitment towards dealing with the issues of NSFAS for the sector will still remain. It doesn't matter where I am. Okay, I hope that helps. Thuli?
Thank you, Prof. The only thing I can add on that is not NSFAS. Well, regarding NSFAS, they'll have to learn from the other countries that they should adjudicate these applications even before results are out, so that the money can be released in January. But where I want to come in is where civil society can make a difference. I mean, a few of us were able to keep students at our university for a couple of months and when the accommodation crisis. I've been paying for the 5 that we're keeping in until now. And a colleague from her funding has said this yesterday that she can give up. But I'm not rich. I don't own any property. Well, no, I own a house. But I don't have any historical wealth. I don't have generational wealth. I'm the first to graduate in my family. So if I'm able to pay from the little that I have, surely people can pay from the little that. Everyone wants to only pay from their institutional things. But if we can just pay a little from our own pockets as well, we can solve some of this problem. There was a student in the US where they had hunger. Little ones had hunger because parents could not pay for the tuck shop. I think this boy was 9 years old. He went around creating little bracelets for $2, and he cleared the entire tuck shop debt for other little ones. And in so doing, eliminated the stigma that you're not eating because your parents are owing the tuck shop debt. At Washington University, I went there to deliver an OR Tambo lecture. The year I was there, students had come together to say they're going to ask their parents to pay just a little bit extra so that a bursary could be created for descendants of the slaves that were sold to save Georgetown University from being liquidated. So I think this is where businesses and ordinary people can come together and say, What will be our role? And this is maybe bringing in Sharon here. Perhaps as a society, we have to ask, what is it that we're prepared to liberate from tyrannical markets? Because at the moment, everything, the MD of Tuma, who also happens to my son, he always talks about just to live today, everything is saleable. There's nothing you can just expect that this is the bottom line of society. Is it possible that we could liberate education from markets? First degree, basic education and first degree. In most of Africa, it's liberated from markets. Government takes care of that. That's something we have to think about. And of course, they would say, we can't afford it from taxes. That's why I'm saying that then could be done from society. And as part of the Musa plan, for example, we could say, with the Musa plan, that raindrop approach, if we pay our 10 Rand, we say, this is going to basic education for all. That people should take loans for their second degree, not for their first degree. That's something that we have to think about. The second question about social workers, about social science degrees. One of the best economists I ever met in my life was not an economist. Ben Turok.
Ben, yeah.
Which says to me, we have to allow these young students to be versatile. If somebody has a university degree, they don't have to be employed to do social science. But also, if government realized, ma'am, that we're designing a society, then we would have those social scientists. Apartheid was not designed by economists. It was designed by sociologists, because it takes sociologists to understand human dynamics and build a society. So we'll have to talk to government now, to the Minister of Planning, which people keep chopping the part about planning. They call that Minister of Monitoring and Evaluation. It's a Minister of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. So maybe the Minister of Planning can make sure that we bring in. But that said, you also have to teach young people on how to use the internet. And this is where, again, business can assist. Standard Bank tried this. I'm not selling Standard Bank, guys. I'm not a client. But they did try to get South African young people to get into creating online businesses. Just part of it is, if you have a degree, honestly, there's always something you can sell to someone. There's always a skill that you can sell something. You can teach them something online. You can do minutes for people. It's just, we need an enterprising mindset. So businesses, this is what that Dragon's Shark Tank thing is. We need to help students. I'm not saying government should not employ. I'm just saying we'll have to think in a very out of the box way. And Professor Rosabeth Moskanter says, we shouldn't think out of the box. We should think out of the building. Go out there and not confine ourselves. And lastly, and we should think not just about the students who are not employed now. The machines are taking jobs. So we'll have to think about jobs that people have to do sitting in their homes, not being employed in someone, but working with or for someone without being in. But the ILO, though, says then social security should be available to everyone, because most people want to be employed to someone, because if you're not employed by someone, you have no medical aid, you have no UIF, you have no guaranteed security. So we need to improve on that. So the last one is accountability for social justice. Thank you. That's where I would like to end. Prof. Sandy would love you for asking that question. Prof. Sandy Liebenberg has included in the social justice, in the final year law students, constitutional law students, there's a section on social accountability. That whole final year constitutional law is about accountability, constitutional accountability. So we look at how do you hold government accountable for different things, socioeconomic rights, social justice, land rights and everything. what levers are there? Courts, parliament, political parties. But the other angle is social accountability. The government has invited us to a national dialogue. Have you started pulling yourself together as social groups to be part of that national dialogue? So we have to use these spaces to engage with them to make sure that there is accountable. Social media, you young people are digital citizens. I personally have found that it works. If they're going left when they should go right, and you start a conversation about where they should be going and society kicks in, they change. So please use social media, but don't use social media in a manner that degrades people, divides society, and undermines this beautiful moment of rising together as a people. I just want to end with what Justice Mohammed said. He said, the cosmic forces have thrown us together in South Africa. Black, white, colored, Indian, from all over the world. But just roughly, it's our choice whether we're going to make this a liability or an opportunity to rise. I think the GNU gives us an opportunity to rise together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Thuli. Thanks, Vice Chancellor. Thanks, Sharon, and thank you, the audience online as well. We will be concluding. Any last word from you, Sharon, before we sign off?
Thank you, Thuli. I really appreciate listening to you. I've got notes as well, as somebody else made reference to. So thank you for your inspiration, your messaging, and hope and positivity for the country we all love. Thank you very much. Francis, wonderful in conversation. Always find it a pleasure. It's very, very enjoyable. And to Russell and to Carmenita, thank you. And to the ones behind the scenes, thank you for your success in making it possible for me to be present here with you.
Yeah.